He may even identify himself with it and believe that he is what he appears to be.
Welcome to the NCE Study Guide. I created this study guide using ChatGPT and Notebook LM. So think of these modules as AI-powered audio flashcards. Each one of these 20 modules contains 10 mock questions, representing the kind of questions that you might encounter on the National Counseling exam. I created this primarily for myself, and I decided to make these available to anyone else who might benefit from this kind of study aid. But please note, while I have done my best to ensure that these modules align with NCE content, I encourage you to cross-reference them with trusted study guides and resources for the most accurate preparation. These modules are not affiliated with or endorsed by the NBCC or any official licensing board. So, with no further ado, here are your AI study buddies from Notebook LM. Enjoy.
All right, welcome back everyone. Ready to dive deeper into the world of counseling. We're jumping into Module 7 today.
Module 7, that's right. This one's all about getting you prepped for the NCE.
Exactly, and this module was created using Notebook LM. Pretty cool, right?
It is actually. It gives us a really good set of questions to work with.
Yeah, it does. And this module is focused on assessment and counseling theories, really the foundation of what you need for the NCE. But it's also, I think, more than just the NCE.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the stuff, it goes way beyond just passing a test, right?
Exactly. It's about becoming a better counselor.
100%. Understanding these theories really helps you connect better with your clients.
So let's jump right in. We've got 10 questions to go through today.
Okay, sounds good. Let's tackle them.
All right, question number 1. This comes from question 61 of the module, and it asks, which of the following is an example of a projective assessment tool? And anyway, here are your choices. A, MMPI-2, B, Rorschach ink blot test, C, Beck depression inventory, and D, WAIS-4. So maybe we can start with A, the MMPI-2.
Yeah, the MMPI-2, that's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. It's a personality assessment, a very well-known one. It's used to measure a bunch of different personality traits and, any potential issues. It's really structured, uses true-false questions and things like that.
Okay, so the client would answer these questions, true or false, and then,
Right. Their answers are then used to create a personality profile. It's helpful to kind of get a big picture view of someone's personality, but I don't think it really fits the projective part of the question.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What about B then, the Rorschach ink blot test?
Oh, the Rorschach. Now, this is a classic projective test. Those ink blots, right? I bet you've seen them. Kind of look like, well, anything.
Yeah, they're so interesting.
And that's the whole point. There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what you see, what you feel when you look at them.
So you're projecting your own feelings onto the image.
Exactly. Your answers, they can actually show things you might not even realize about yourself, hidden feelings and things like that.
That's pretty cool, actually. It's like getting a peek into someone's mind. All right, how about C, the Beck Depression Inventory?
The BDI. It's a questionnaire, basically. Clients rate how strong their feelings are, especially feelings related to depression, Really useful tool to assess and track depression, but it's not really like the Rorschach. It's not about just open interpretation.
Right, it's more targeted, right?
Yeah.
Focuses on specific symptoms.
Exactly.
Okay, and lastly, we have option D, the Ways of Two.
The Ways of Two, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. This one's like the gold standard for measuring intelligence. It's a big assessment, covers a lot: verbal skills, problem solving, memory, and how you process information. But it's not designed to get into those deeper levels like projective tests do.
Right, it's about cognitive abilities, not about personality.
Exactly.
Okay, so going back to the question, which of the following is an example of a projective assessment tool?
It's B, the Rorschach ink blot test. Remember, projective tests, they use things that are kind of vague so people can show their own unique thoughts and feelings. They help us explore those deeper psychological layers.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's move on to question 2, question number 62. This one asks about a counseling theory that's all about these 3 things: unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence. And I think, these are really important for building that trust and safety with a client. So here are your choices. A, psychoanalytic therapy, B, Gestalt therapy, C, person-centered therapy, and D, behavioral therapy. Maybe we can start with A again, psychoanalytic therapy.
Psychoanalytic therapy, yeah, that's often linked with Freud. All about the unconscious mind, digging into past experiences, trying to figure out why we do the things we do. Really interesting stuff, but it's not really where you find those three things at the center. The unconditional positive regard and all that.
Right. It's more about those hidden motivations, less about being supportive in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so what about B then? Gestalt therapy.
Gestalt therapy, that's all about being present, being aware of what's happening right now, your thoughts, feelings, even your body. What are you sensing? It's about personal responsibility, living in the moment. Empathy is definitely important, but it doesn't quite hit those three conditions the same way as person-centered therapy.
Okay, so Gestalt might say, notice how you're feeling, but not necessarily, I accept you no matter what.
Exactly.
Interesting. So what about C then? Person-centered therapy.
Now this is where those core conditions really come into play. Carl Rogers, he's the one who really developed person-centered therapy. He believed that everyone has the ability to grow and be their best selves. And to make that happen, you need those three things: unconditional, positive regard, empathy, and congruence.
Okay, I see the connection now. Can you explain what those terms actually mean, like how they work in therapy?
Sure. Unconditional, positive regard, it means accepting the client for exactly who they are, no judgment, no strings attached. You're showing them deep care and respect no matter what they've done. Empathy is about really understanding their world, seeing things from their perspective, feeling with them, not just thinking about them. And congruence is being real, authentic as a therapist, being transparent so the client knows they can trust you.
I can see how that would make a client feel really safe and heard.
It's essential, really. It creates a strong foundation for the work.
Okay, and lastly, we have D, behavioral therapy.
Behavioral therapy focuses on what you can see the behaviors, right? It uses things like rewards and consequences to help people change behaviors that aren't helpful. Empathy is important here too, and the relationship with the therapist, but it doesn't emphasize those three core conditions the same way.
Right, so behavioral therapy might be about changing a specific action, whereas person-centered therapy is about supporting the whole person as they grow.
A good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so back to the question. Which counseling theory emphasizes unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence?
The answer is C, person-centered therapy. These three things are the core of the approach. They're what makes it work.
And I love how person-centered therapy really focuses on empowering the client. All right, moving on to question 3. This is question 63. It asks, which therapeutic approach involves identifying automatic thoughts and challenging cognitive distortions? The options are A, solution-focused brief therapy, B, Gestalt therapy, C, cognitive behavioral therapy, and D, existential therapy. Let's start with A, solution-focused brief therapy.
Solution-focused brief therapy, also called SFBT, it's about, finding solutions. It focuses on what the client wants to achieve, not so much on what's happened in the past. Practical, efficient, but doesn't really target those automatic thoughts and distortions.
Okay, so it's less about why do I feel this way and more about what do I want to change?
That's a good way to think about it.
All right, what about B, Gestalt therapy?
We talked about Gestalt a bit earlier. It's all about being present, right? Now, it does look at thoughts, but it doesn't really focus on changing specific thought patterns the same way as the theory we're looking for here.
Okay, so someone might become aware of their thoughts, but not necessarily analyze them or where they come from.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at C, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Now, this is where those automatic thoughts and distortions are really important. CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, it's all about how our thoughts affect how we feel and what we do. Like if you keep thinking, I'm a failure, you're going to feel awful and maybe not even try new things.
Yeah, because you think you're going to fail anyway.
Right. CBT gives you tools to recognize those negative thoughts and challenge them, change them.
So it's like retraining your brain to think in a more positive and realistic way.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's about interrupting those negative cycles in your head.
Okay, and the last choice, D, existential therapy.
Existential therapy, that's all about the bigger questions, meaning purpose, freedom, what's it all about? It helps people explore their values, find their path. Thoughts and beliefs are part of it, but it's not focused on those day-to-day negative thoughts like CBT.
Okay, so it's more about those big life questions, less about fixing specific thinking patterns.
Exactly.
So to go back to the question, which therapeutic approach involves identifying automatic thoughts and challenging cognitive distortions?
The answer is C, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the one that really focuses on changing those thought patterns.
And it's important to remember that, this stuff, it can be helpful for anyone, even outside of therapy. Once you start to recognize those negative thoughts, you can start to challenge them and change things.
Absolutely. It's empowering, really.
Okay, let's move on to question 4. This one's about careers. Question 64 asks, what is the primary purpose of using a career interest inventory? And, I think most of us have taken one of these at some point. They can be kind of fun. So here are the choices. A, to diagnose career-related mental health issues. B, to match clients with specific job openings. C, to explore client preferences and interests related to careers. And D, to assess the client's personality traits. So let's start with A.
Career interest inventories, they're definitely not for diagnosing mental health issues. That's for a qualified mental health professional. These are about exploring your interests, not about finding disorders or anything like that.
Okay, so it's more about exploration than diagnosis.
Exactly.
What about B, matching people with specific jobs?
Well, career interest inventories can give you some good information about what you might like in a job, but they're not a job placement service. They can't guarantee you a job.
Right. It's about understanding yourself, not necessarily about finding a specific job opening.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, what about C then? Exploring preferences and interests related to careers.
This is it. This is the main purpose. Career interest inventories are all about helping people figure out what they enjoy doing, what kind of work environment they might like, what gets them excited. It's about figuring out what might make you happy in your career.
So it's about matching who you are with what you do.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and what about D, assessing personality traits?
Personality is important for careers, for sure, but that's not the main focus of a career interest inventory. There are other assessments for that.
So it's more about what you like to do than about specific personality traits.
That's a good distinction.
Okay, let's go back to the question. What is the primary purpose of using a career interest inventory?
The answer is C, to explore client preferences and interests related to careers. They're tools for self-discovery.
Okay, so it's not about finding the perfect job, but more about understanding yourself and what kind of work would be a good fit.
Exactly. Think of it like a compass, not a GPS. It points you in a good direction, but you choose your own path.
I like that. It's about exploring and discovering. All right, let's get a little more technical with question 5, question 65. This one asks, which term refers to the consistency of a test over time or across different administrations? And this is really important when we're talking about how good assessments are. Here are your choices. A, validity. B, standardization. C, reliability. And D, generalizability. So what about A, validity?
Validity is about accuracy. Does the test actually measure what it says it measures? Like, does an IQ test really measure intelligence? It's about making sure the test is hitting the mark.
Right, so it's about making sure the test is actually measuring what it claims to be measured.
Precisely.
Okay, what about B, standardization?
Standardization, that's all about making sure the test is given and scored the same way every time for everyone. Same instructions, same amount of time, same scoring rules. It's about fairness, making sure everyone has an equal chance.
Okay, so it's about making sure the testing process is fair and consistent.
That's the goal, yes.
Okay, what about C, reliability?
This is the one. Reliability is about consistency in the results. Does the test give you similar results over time, even if it's given in different ways? Like, think about a scale. If you step on a scale and it gives you a different weight every time, you wouldn't trust it, right?
Not at all.
Same with psychological tests. We need to know they're giving us consistent results we can trust.
Okay, so reliability is all about getting consistent results from a test.
Exactly.
And lastly, we have D, generalizability.
Generalizability means, can we take the results of this test and apply them to a bigger group of people? Like, if a test is made for college students, can we use it for everyone? That's what generalizability is about.
Okay, so it's about how widely we can apply the findings of the test.
Yes, that's a good way to think about it.
All right, let's go back to the question. Which term refers to the consistency of a test over time or across different administrations?
The answer is C, reliability. It's all about those consistent results.
Reliability is definitely super important. Okay, let's move on to question 6, question 66. This one takes us into developmental psychology. It asks, in Erikson's psychosocial stages, what is the primary conflict during early adulthood? And, for those who might not remember, Erikson's theory says we go through different stages throughout our lives, and each stage has a central conflict we need to work through. Here are your options. A, trust versus mistrust. B, industry versus inferiority. C, identity versus role confusion. And D, intimacy versus isolation. So let's start with A, Trust versus mistrust.
Trust versus mistrust, that's the very first stage. It happens during infancy. It's all about the baby learning whether they can trust the world or not based on how their caregivers treat them.
Right. It's about those early relationships shaping our view of the world.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what about B then? Industry versus inferiority.
Industry versus inferiority, that happens when kids are a bit older, maybe 6 to 12 years old. It's about learning new skills, doing well in school, feeling good about what you can do.
Right. It's about feeling competent and capable.
Exactly.
Okay, what about C? Identity versus role confusion.
Ah, the teenage years. This is when you're figuring out who you are, what you believe in, where you fit in. Lots of trying new things, experimenting, trying to find what's real for you.
Right, that makes sense. A lot of exploration going on during those years.
A lot of change and questioning, that's for sure.
Okay, and lastly, option D, intimacy versus isolation.
Intimacy versus isolation. This is the stage Erickson says happens in early adulthood. It's about building those really close connections, romantic relationships, friendships, strong family bonds. It's about feeling connected and belonging.
Okay, so it's about that human need for connection.
Exactly. And if people can't build those connections, they might end up feeling isolated and alone.
Right, it's a crucial stage for our well-being and happiness.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to the question. In Erickson's psychosocial stages, what is the primary conflict during early adulthood?
It's D, intimacy versus isolation. All about those connections.
And I think this stage is especially important these days. We have a lot of people struggling with feeling lonely and disconnected.
That's a really good point. It's something we as counselors need to be aware of.
Exactly. We have to help people build those connections that are so important for their well-being. Okay, let's move on to question.
Yeah, and it's something we can really help people with, as counselors. All right, let's switch gears a bit. Question 7, question number 67, it asks, what does the miracle question in solution-focused brief therapy help clients identify? Sounds kind of mysterious, right?
It does. What is this miracle question all about? Here are the options. A, the root cause of their problems. B, unconscious desires. C, goals and desired outcomes. And D, cognitive distortions. Okay, so maybe we start with A, the root cause of their problems.
A lot of therapies, like psychoanalysis, they really try to figure out what happened in the past to cause the problems now, but that's not what solution-focused brief therapy is about. SFBT, it's about the future, what you want to create.
Okay, so it's not about dwelling on the past. It's about moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's about empowering the client, helping them build the life they want.
So what about B then? Unconscious desires.
Unconscious desires, that's more of a psychoanalytic thing, right? Like we talked about earlier. The miracle question isn't about digging into all that.
Okay, it's not about those hidden motivations or anything.
Right. It's more practical, more focused on what the client wants to see happen.
All right, what about C then? Goals and desired outcomes.
Now you're getting warmer. The miracle question, it's all about helping people see what they really want,
Right.
Their dreams, their hopes for the future. It's like painting a picture of what life would be like without the problem.
Okay, so how does that actually work? Like, what would a therapist say?
Well, imagine a therapist saying something like, imagine you're sleeping and a miracle happens. The problem that brought you here is gone. Poof. When you wake up, what's different? How do you know the miracle worked?
Wow, that's a powerful question. It really makes you think about what you want, not just what's wrong.
Right. And when people answer that question, they often start talking about the things they really value, the things they wish they had. And once those goals are clear, well, then you can start working towards them,
Okay, that makes sense. What about D then? Cognitive distortions.
Cognitive distortions, remember. We talked about those with CBT. They're those negative thought patterns that can really mess with how we see things. The miracle question might touch on some of that, but it's not the main point.
Right, it's more about focusing on what you want to see happen, not just analyzing those negative thoughts.
Yes, exactly. So to go back to the question, what does the miracle question in solution-focused brief therapy help clients identify?
Sounds like it's C, goals and desired outcomes.
You nailed it. It's a really cool way to help people get clear about what they want and start moving in that direction.
I'm definitely going to try that. Okay, question 8, question number 68. This one's about ethics. It asks, what is a key ethical principle counselors must follow when working with minors? And this is a big one. There's a lot to think about when working with kids. Here are your choices. A, never disclose any information to parents. B, obtain informed consent from the minor only. C, balance the minor's confidentiality with parental rights. And D, avoid counseling minors without parental presence. So what about A, never disclosing anything to the parents?
Confidentiality, that's super important in therapy, for everyone. But it's not always that simple, especially with kids. Sometimes you might have to tell things to the parents, especially if the child's safety is at risk.
So there are limits to confidentiality when it comes to protecting the child.
Yes, absolutely. Like if a child talks about abuse or says they're thinking about hurting themselves, well, the counselor might have to tell someone, to protect the child. It's a tough situation, but safety comes first.
Okay, that's important. What about B then? Getting consent only from the minor.
It's definitely important to talk to the child, get their agreement to be in therapy. But usually you need the parents' consent too, especially with younger kids.
So it's about involving both the child and the parents in the process, making sure everyone's on board.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, what about C then? Balancing the minor's confidentiality with the parents' rights.
This is the tricky part. It's a balancing act, and counselors have to use their judgment, make decisions based on what's best for the child.
So how do they do that? Like, how do they figure out what to do?
It starts with being open and honest. At the beginning, the counselor should talk to both the child and the parents about confidentiality, what will be shared, what won't be shared. It's about setting those boundaries right away.
Okay, that makes sense. But are there times when it's not so clear-cut, what to do?
Oh, definitely. Sometimes it's a tough call. That's why it's important for counselors to talk to each other, get advice from supervisors and things like that.
Right, so they're not just making these decisions alone, they're getting support.
Exactly. And the last option, D, avoiding counseling minors without the parents there.
Right, so what about that one?
Well, parents should be involved. That's usually important. But sometimes it's okay to see the child alone, especially as they get older. It depends, on what's going on, what the family is like.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. Each kid, each family is different. But the most important thing is the child's safety. That always comes first.
Okay, so to go back to the question, what is a key ethical principle counselors must follow when working with minors?
It's C, balancing the minor's confidentiality with the parents' rights. It's about finding that balance, doing what's best for the child.
It definitely sounds tricky. Okay, question 9, question 69. It asks, which of the following is considered a secondary prevention strategy? Now, when we talk about prevention in mental health, we usually think about 3 levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And here are your choices. A, health education workshops. B, crisis intervention hotlines. C, physical rehabilitation programs. And D, routine mental health screenings. Maybe we start with A, health education workshops.
Health education workshops, those are a great example of primary prevention. It's about teaching people how to stay healthy, how to cope with stress, preventing problems before they even start.
So it's about giving people the knowledge and skills they need to stay well.
Exactly. Like teaching kids about healthy eating habits or teaching adults about stress management techniques. It's all about preventing problems.
That's great. What about B then, crisis intervention hotlines?
Crisis hotlines? Those can actually be different levels of prevention. It depends, If someone's calling in the middle of a crisis, that's secondary prevention. You're trying to stop things from getting worse, help them through that tough moment.
Okay, so it's about intervening quickly when someone's in a crisis.
Yeah, that's right. But a hotline could also be primary prevention, If someone calls before they're in a full-blown crisis, maybe they're just feeling overwhelmed and need some support, some resources.
So it really depends on the situation, why someone is calling.
Exactly. It's about being there for people, whatever they're going through.
Okay, what about C then? Physical rehabilitation programs.
Physical rehab, that's usually tertiary prevention. It's about helping people recover after something big has happened, like a stroke or an injury. You're trying to help them regain function, get back to their lives as much as possible.
So it's about supporting people after they've already had a health issue.
Right, helping them get back on their feet.
Okay, and lastly, D, routine mental health screenings.
Routine screenings, now that's a good example of secondary prevention. It's like going to the doctor for a checkup. You're checking for problems early on when they're easier to treat.
Okay, so it's about catching things early before
Yeah.
they become big problems.
Yeah. It often involves asking specific questions or using questionnaires to figure out who might be at risk for mental health issues.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like being proactive, right?
Exactly. Early detection is really important.
All right, so back to the question. Which of the following is considered a secondary prevention strategy?
The answer is D, routine mental health screenings.
Okay, makes sense. Prevention is so important, both for physical health and mental health. All right, last question for Module 7. Question 70 asks, what is the focus of existential therapy? And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's a really interesting approach. Here are your options. A, analyzing past relationships. B, developing insight into unconscious conflicts. C, addressing freedom, responsibility, and meaning in life. And D, identifying and correcting cognitive distortions. So, let's start with A, analyzing past relationships.
Past relationships, they definitely shape us, but that's not the main focus of existential therapy. It's not about digging into the past so much. It's more about the present and the future.
Right, it's not about dwelling on old hurts or anything like that.
It's about looking forward. What do you want to create now? What meaning do you want to find in your life?
Okay, so what about B then? Developing insight into unconscious conflicts.
Unconscious conflicts, that's very psychoanalytic. Existential therapy, it's not about that, It's not about unearthing all those hidden things from the past.
Okay, so it's a different approach, more focused on the big picture.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, what about C then? Addressing freedom, responsibility, and meaning in life.
That's it. That's the heart of existential therapy. It's about those big questions, What's the point of it all? What's my purpose? It can feel heavy, but it's also really powerful.
It sounds like it, kind of daunting, but also exciting.
That's a good way to put it. It's about facing those big questions head on, finding your own answers.
Okay, and lastly, option D, identifying and correcting cognitive distortions.
We talked about that with CBT, right? Cognitive distortions. Existential therapy is different. It's not about fixing those specific thoughts.
So CBT is more practical, focused on those specific thought patterns, and existential therapy is more philosophical, looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's a good way to see it.
Okay, let's go back to the question. What is the focus of existential therapy?
It's C, addressing freedom, responsibility, and meaning in life.
What a powerful approach. Okay, we've covered a lot in this module. Projective tests, different counseling theories, ethics, even those big existential questions.
A lot of ground covered, that's for sure. But it's all important stuff, for any counselor.
I feel a lot more prepared for the NCE, and, I think even more importantly, I feel more inspired to keep learning and growing as a counselor.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just the start. Keep learning, keep exploring.
Wow, we really went deep on Module 7, didn't we?
Yeah, lots of good stuff in there.
From assessments to theories to ethics, even those existential questions. And it really hit me how, even though this is all theoretical, it's all about helping people in real life.
Right. That's the point, isn't it? These theories, they give us a way to understand people better, build those connections, and help them make real changes.
Okay, so as we wrap up this module, what were some of the big takeaways for you?
Well, I think those core conditions of person-centered therapy, they're just so essential, Unconditional positive regard, empathy, congruence. When a client feels that from you, it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah, it's like creating that safe space where they can really be themselves.
Exactly. And those core conditions, you can use them in any type of therapy, really. It's about that attitude, that way of being with your clients.
Right. It's about that genuineness, that warmth.
Yeah.
And speaking of powerful approaches, I have to mention CBT again. Recognizing those automatic thoughts, those cognitive distortions, it's so helpful, even for ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. CBT gives you tools to change those thought patterns. Instead of those negative thoughts running the show, you can choose different thoughts that are more helpful.
Okay, and I also want to touch on those psychometric terms again. Reliability and validity. They might sound kind of technical, but they're really important for making sure the assessments we use are, actually working.
Oh, absolutely. We need to know that the tests we use are giving us good information, consistent information. That's what reliability is all about. And then validity, that's about making sure the test is measuring what it's supposed to measure, that it's accurate.
And thinking about development, I keep coming back to Erickson's stages. They're so insightful. Understanding those challenges people face at different points in their lives can really help us connect with our clients.
Yeah, especially the intimacy versus isolation stage, right? Yeah. That's a big one for a lot of people in early adulthood. So many are struggling to find those close connections, that sense of belonging.
And that need to connect. It's so human, but it can be hard. And, I also wanted to give a shout out to the miracle question. It's so simple, but so powerful.
I know, right? It's like it helps people shift their focus. Instead of just looking at the problems, they start to imagine what they want instead, what could be possible. It can really spark hope.
So much wisdom in one question. Okay, I think we've really covered the essentials of Module 7. We've explored some amazing concepts, and I hope you're feeling more ready for the NCE and even more excited about being a counselor.
Yeah, and remember, the learning never stops. There's always more to discover, more to learn. That's what makes this field so exciting.
That's so true. Well, that's it for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another module, ready to explore even more. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep that curiosity alive.
See you next time.
2, 3.
Nice to be in orbit.